Hello, gentle listener, and welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new, performed by your humble narrator, Kristin Holland. Back again, all ready to share some dark matter with you, good folk. We do hope you've enjoyed our 200th episode celebration over the last 2 weeks. Thanks again to the wonderful Ian Sputnik for allowing us to use his twisted creations to mark the event. Speaking of twisted creations, we have another tale from Jez Conolly to share with you. You may remember his delightfully weird Neither, from episode 151, in which a social anthropologist pops into a small Yorkshire pub for a spot of lunch, where he makes the acquaintance of Bernard and Miss Doreen Pudding, as well as something unspeakable in the basement. If you enjoy the tale we're about to share with you, then we strongly recommend you go back and revisit that one. But for now, let's pop over to bonny Scotland, wherein Nocturnal Transmissions proudly presents Jez Conolly's Special Collection. Special Collections. What became the first day? I imagine you've probably leafed through to this part of my memory book. I turned the corner of the page over deliberately. If you skipped the earlier entries, you may not be aware that I decided to keep the book, partly in order to offset the effects of what my father used to call my funny head. With so much time on my hands these days, I find it useful to write down the things that happen. Not that very much does happen here, or rather, not much has happened. Until today, that is. So all of a sudden, there's quite a lot for me to write down. If I don't write it down now, I will forget what has happened. Sometimes I forget things anyway. So when I reread these pages myself, I hope to get reminded. I'll probably forget writing this, and reading it for that matter. But that's okay, because this book is not for me. It's for you. I'm writing this tucked up in bed. It's 1:45. I find this to be the best time, perhaps the only time I'm able to write down my memories of the day. It feels like the only time I'm allowed to. The only time I allow myself to is what I meant to say. Anyway, something odd and rather exciting happened this morning. We found a human foot, a left foot, just beyond the boathouse. I had taken Licorice out for a morning toilet time when she spotted it, and after she'd been to do her business in her favourite rock pool, she brought this curious find back to me. "Oh, good girl," I said automatically as she dropped the foot at my feet. When, in the next instant, I realised just what she had brought me back, I recoiled, but was then compelled to approach the gruesome find when Licorice began sniffing at it hungrily. After pulling her away and refastening her lead to her harness, I crouched down to take a closer look. Yes, it was a human foot, all right. How thrilling. Wait a moment, though. I should take a breath before getting carried away by all this excitement. I'm forgetting that you're new to all of this. I'm always forgetting. So let me say a bit about myself. I didn't do that before, when this book was just for me. You can call me Bunty. I was going to say everybody does, but it would be more accurate to say everybody did, because by and large my former circle of friends is a thing of the past. Nobody knows me well enough to reach the familiarity stage of nicknames anymore, or any name for that matter. Oh, that's fine with me, of course. My current social isolation is entirely by design. Bunty, after the children's comic, some people of a certain age would ask when they heard what I was called. What I wanted to do in ask this was to refute it by claiming some higher explanation for the name. But the fact is that I did indeed acquire it in comparison to the popular young girls' comic. At least it's better than my given name, which, if you must know, is Margaret. But absolutely nobody calls me that. Nobody. To my contemporaries at the girls' school I attended, I seemed to represent the acme of staid wholesomeness, a trusty old maid. At just 6 years of age, I hasten to add. They were friendly enough towards me, but as I grew older with them, I found that I wasn't always included. Not because they didn't like me or took against me. It was because I think they didn't consider me sophisticated enough to contribute to their shared activities. When I say sophisticated, I suppose I mean with it. Oh dear, I think that expression has had its day. Expect I'm showing my age by using it. I can't think of its modern equivalent. I imagine you know what I mean. Anyway, that was all fine by me, because even at that tender age, I was already beginning to feel the pull towards the life of the happy recluse. Life led me to my present Highlands hermit existence. But please believe me when I tell you that I wouldn't have it any other way. Some might think I washed up here to live out my days on the banks of this lonely loch in the far north of Scotland. But the truth is, I chose this life. If anything, I rushed towards it. If I'm allowed to use a rather tired old cliché, the day I got the keys to this tumble-down boat hold with its leaky roof and innumerable draughts truly was the first day of the rest of my life. For 25 years I put up with the confines of a career. The library was very good for me. I managed to get a secure job in the Special Collections Department. It suited me very well, being, as I was and am, well versed in the ways of custodianship and the accurate maintenance of a system and an order to things. However, with it came the trials of urban living and constantly adapting myself in order to get on with people, which is not something that comes particularly naturally to me. Oh, but that's enough about yours truly. I'm sure you're eager to read more about my excellent find. I plucked up the courage to pick up the foot, using the pincer of my thumb and forefinger to lift it by its big toe and carefully take it dripping into my kitchen. Once inside, and with Licorice comfortably curled up on the tartan blanket in her bed basket with her favourite toys, I put on my white cotton lint-free gloves and carefully placed the foot in the centre of an enamel roasting dish that I had unearthed from the drawer below the stove. This dish was ideal. I needed to put it into something with a reasonably deep lip to ensure that the water I used to clean the foot didn't splash everywhere. Once I'd washed and wiped it, I could see that there were some small fragments of pearly pink varnish on the toenails, and a plain dark blue-green tattoo of what looked like a cartoon pig, about half an inch wide, just below the ankle bone. If the previous owner of the foot had developed any hard skin or calluses, they'd been completely erased by the exfoliating action of the loch waters. In fact, it was remarkable how smooth it felt, albeit through the thin material of my gloves. I'm not quite sure what I was feeling for, to be perfectly honest. I suppose I was thinking back to the many grisly television crime dramas I'd seen repeated ad nauseum over the years. In the days when I had a television, I mean. There's no reception out here. I just have memories of those shows. When I'm allowed to have memories, that is. I realised at that moment of examination that I harbour a fantasy about being an amateur criminal pathologist, although in truth I had no real idea what I was doing. I do recall being allowed to carefully examine some of the pages of the folio-sized anatomy book dating from the 1500s that was held in the strong room located in the library archives. It featured large, eye-wateringly detailed engravings of dissections, mostly of the head and abdomen. I don't remember any illustrations of feet. My guess was that the anatomists of the time were more interested in the workings of the vital organs than bodily extremities. Unlike them, this foot interested me greatly. I wanted it to tell me its story. As I don't possess the artistic prowess of a medieval anatomist, nor the small tape recorder of a police forensic expert, I decided to write everything down in one of my other, smaller notebooks. Not in this book. As I say, this one's just for me. And you. I thought those notes might come in useful if the authorities should happen to come asking questions. Or, for that matter, if any more parts of this poor unfortunate person were to fetch up on the stretch of loch outside my property. I do recall that as I entertained this latter thought, I felt a distinct shiver go through me. Happening upon the foot had given me something of a shock, but for some reason its very incongruity had until then blinded me to the possibility that more of the body might find its way to me. Oh, such was my anxiety that I couldn't bring myself to go looking at the loch side as today wore on, despite Licorice's protestations. Oh, time's up. That's all for now. Go to sleep. Everything is all right. What became 2 days later. I'm here again. It's approaching midnight, my one time. In any event, yesterday saw heavy rains and high winds, and from my window I could see the surface of the loch whipping up into repeated peaks with the force of the gale. Today was much calmer, and by this morning I had laid my earlier worries to rest. Licorice and I took our time to poke around every nook and cranny of our bit of shoreline, prodding into pools and lifting up big racks of seaweed, spurred on by the hope of discovering further remnants. And duly, today our searching was rewarded. Lapping up against the surface of a large boulder was another foot. I called Licorice over to join me in staring at the find. As we studied it, a thought suddenly occurred to me. This wasn't just another foot. This was another left foot. So, either its previous owner was a very bad dancer. Sorry, please forgive that tasteless joke. Or a second person had been separated from one of their feet. Now that is something to conjure with. I brought this other foot into my kitchen to compare it with the first one. I had run out of ovenware to place it on, so this time I made do with a large dinner plate. I bought a set of them in the January sales one year back when I lived in the city. 6 plates in all, along with the rest of the set. Funny, just looking at the foot sitting there, it struck me that I've never entertained enough people to warrant use of all 6 plates. In fact, I was in the habit of using the exact same plate just for myself, washing it up immediately after using it, while the other 5 slowly gathered dust in the kitchen cupboard. Until now, that is. It's a shame, really. Straight away, I could see that the second foot was noticeably smaller than the first foot. At a guess, I would say that the most recent find belonged to an older person, possibly someone in their 40s or 50s, also female. As with the first foot, it had been very cleanly hacked off about an inch above the ankle bone, and while the cut wound itself was as clean as a whistle, there were marks around the ankle bone suggesting that some kind of restraint had bitten into the flesh. Interestingly, this new foot lacked its toenails, with still reddened fringes of skin indicating that they had likely been forcibly taken out. All of these delicious clues. My mind was whirring with possible scenarios. Perhaps the victims were a mother and her daughter, who have been systematically dismembered, possibly in front of each other. How wonderfully horrible. Then a thought occurred to me. Here I'd been assuming that the owners of these feet were deceased, having been entirely chopped up and tossed into the water, but what if they were still alive? However horrendous an injury like this might be, if the only parts that they had been separated from were their feet, they could conceivably still be alive somewhere. This gave me something to ponder. Should I make the 2-mile walk to the telephone box on the high road in order to report the possibility that 2 people, currently minus a foot each, might still be alive somewhere, albeit probably incapable of escaping their plight? I spent a little while considering how far somebody could limp or drag themselves on one leg. Taking a balanced view, I could tell from the condition of the remaining flesh on the feet, give or take the effects of the loch water, that they hadn't been attached to their corresponding legs for a wee while, and so in all likelihood the life would probably have drained out of the unfortunate individuals by now anyway. This took the sting out of the urgency to inform anyone of my finds, which suited me. Partly because I could see that there was a nasty-looking storm coming in from the southwest, and I didn't particularly fancy the long walk to make that call to the police. But mostly because I was far more interested in weaving my own narrative around the forsaken appendages. As I say, I don't get much excitement, and here was a mystery that had quite literally landed right in my lap. So, night has fallen, and having placed the 2 feet into thick plastic bags in my deep freeze, I've taken to my bed before travelling to the land of Nod on the stroke of the clock. I consider myself lucky to have come upon these 2 left feet. But if I'm to crack the crime, luck cannot come into it. Henceforth I shall be extra vigilant, in case any more parts of these bodies should get washed up on the banks outside my house. I'm keen to collect more clues that might help me to piece together this perplexing conundrum. That's all for now. Go to sleep. Everything is all right. What became the Thursday? An exciting development. This morning my heightened curiosity was rewarded. On this occasion, Licorice and I didn't have to go hunting. After breakfast, when I took my kitchen mat outside to beat the dust out of it, I spotted something about the size of a football rolling around at the edge of the water. Laying the mat down on the little wall just outside my front door, I approached this new object stealthily, and even before getting super close to it, I could see what it was. You guessed it. A head. As it happens, it was positioned looking out across the loch, so as I made my approach, I couldn't see the face. When I reached it, I swizzled it around and took a first look. I could tell straight away that the marine life of the loch had taken their pound of flesh. The eyes were gone, as were the lips, nose, and most of the cheeks, and it was apparent that something had been nibbling at the ears, although, perhaps surprisingly, they were still largely intact. The hair, a wet straggle across what remained of the features, was matted with flotsam. I was glad that Licorice was still asleep, because if she had discovered the head before me, there's a fair chance she would have helped herself to some of the remaining meat. Thinking on my feet, so to speak, I turned back to the house and went to fetch the washing-up bowl from the kitchen sink. This, I thought, would provide a suitable means of carriage indoors for the head. There was sufficient hair left on top of it for me to grab a hold and lift it into the bowl. As I did this, I could see straight away that something, probably crabs, had helped itself to the poor soul's tongue, the denuded bottom jaw slackening enough to expose the gape of a mouth with mostly just teeth remaining. I didn't know crabs lived in lochs until I moved here. You get all sorts in there, the things I've seen. Frankly, there wasn't a great deal left when I came to take a closer look at it indoors. Certainly there was little to identify the victim, although I'd say it was a safe bet that it had belonged to a woman. Obviously, this discovery led me to dismiss any remaining thoughts that the person might still be alive. A foot is one thing, but I don't think it's possible to survive very long without your head. I can't imagine that a family member would have an easy job confirming the identity of the victim based on what was left. It'd have to be a job for dental records and DNA. Having said that, there were a few pointers worth noting. The upper part of the right ear contained a ring piercing. Whether this had once been accompanied by other jewellery could only be guessed at, the lobes having gone. Also, as it dried out in the heat of the kitchen, there were signs that the hair had been bleached at some point in the past, although judging by the dark roots, the bleaching had been some time ago. As the overwhelming majority of the teeth that were left in position in the jawbone were clearly loose, I took the decision to remove them and put them in a sealed plastic sandwich bag for safekeeping. I just hoped I wouldn't lose the bag. I know that teeth can tell experts a lot about murder victims. Did I just write murder? Well, that's me assuming. The poor woman could very easily have ended up like this on account of an accident. It's important to consider all possibilities. Well, probably not suicide. I mean, who cuts their own head off? No, come on now. It couldn't possibly have been an accident. It'd have been a pretty complex one to account for 2 people perishing in quite such a devastatingly fatal way. Oh, it's murder, all right. How utterly delicious. Not that I wish to be disrespectful to these 2 poor souls, but I don't have very many reasons to get excited around here, so perhaps you can forgive me my somewhat inappropriate exuberance. I'm keeping my feet on the ground, if you'll forgive the term, with all of this homespun forensic investigation. Record keeping is a very important part of criminal deduction, don't you think? I want to be useful. Perhaps, naturally, I began to wonder where the second head might have got to, which is a bit presumptuous. Just because the 2 people lost a foot each, it's not a given that they'd also both been beheaded. Anyway, I tempered my expectations with the thought that the possibility that every separated part of the 2 bodies washing up exclusively on my beach was rather unlikely, given the number of inlets and shingle stretches for the pieces to wind up on other than mine. Anyway, I'm starting to feel tired, so that's all for now. Go to sleep. Everything is all right. What became the following day? Imagine my delight when this morning the second head popped up in the waters facing onto my little house. I mean, what are the odds? This one, rather comically, seemed to be staring right back at me when I clapped eyes on it. Ordinarily, I might find this a little disconcerting, but I was so thrilled to find this other missing piece that any degree of discomfort barely registered. I think I'm becoming inured to the sheer horror of it all. I'm writing this and giggling. I fetched a paddle from the boathouse and managed, more by luck than judgment, to bat it into a position close enough for me to grab the locks of hair that remained on top of it. I'll confess that I caught my breath slightly when I lifted the crown and discovered that there was nothing left below the nose. It was a kind of carrot top, if you like, sliced right through. I was imagining somebody with the head on a bacon slicer or a lathe, making cross-sections. Gosh, how thoroughly gruesome. This lack of a lower half did make me think that identification this time was going to be super difficult. But to coin a phrase, I had to concede that half a head was better than no head at all. So out came a second, previously unused dinner plate, and straight away, just as I had with the feet, it was time to compare and contrast the 2 head finds. What was left of the second head actually had more discerning features left on the remaining part of the face when compared to the first one, which had been fairly picked clean. I could make out crow's feet either side of the sockets that, unlike the first head, still had eyeballs nestling in them, somewhat to my surprise. I want to say that this poor lady, I'm safely assuming it's another lady, had lovely green eyes in life. But as even the whites of these eyes in death were now a grisly shade of green, it's more likely that her irises had at one time been either grey or blue. One thing really intrigued me, and I gave myself a little metaphorical pat on the back for noticing it. Either side of the bridge of the nose, I could still make out the 2 small telltale depressions made by spectacles. Second victim, probably short-sighted. I wrote in my investigation notebook. Eat your heart out, Sherlock. Not a great deal else to go on, though. Shoulder length, silvery grey-coloured hair, from a time when the head was attached to shoulders, obviously. A small hole beneath the left eye, no bigger than a speck. That was about it. So, into a bag, and into the freezer it went. Matching each of the feet to the right head was going to be challenging. My uneducated guess was that there was a difference in age between them of a couple of decades. My mother-daughter theory again. And while one foot was bigger than the other, each cranium was about the same size. Of course, foot size varies considerably. I know this from working a weekend job in a local shoe shop during my teenage years. I hated that job. Always felt odd touching the customers' feet. Funny how these detached ones don't bother me at all. When I got to thinking about it, it seemed a reasonable decision to pair up the smaller foot with the first head, given the hair dye evidence. Or perhaps it makes more sense for the other two bits to be matching. Because you might think that an untattooed foot would more likely go together with someone whose hair was going grey. Now, it's a big assumption, I realise that, because plenty of mature ladies have tattoos these days. In fact, I seem to remember one of my colleagues at work having a tattoo on her foot. I noticed it in the staff room one day. She was wearing sandals. It's all a bit blurry. I have a headache tonight, so I've decided to take some pills. I checked. It's safe to take them at the same time as my other pills. So then, go to sleep. Everything is all right. What became the day after that? I woke refreshed this morning and decided to have a day not thinking about the body parts that I've found. I think I've become slightly too excited by all this business. A bit of normality would do me some good. So, I washed some clothes, took Licorice out for a walk, up the escarpment for a change, not by the shore of the loch. Then I made myself a nice meal and did my breathing exercises. By this evening, though, I gave in to the urge to re-examine the pieces, in the hope that I might notice something about them that hadn't struck me yet. I'm not quite sure what I hoped for or expected to discover, but I figured it was worth a shot. So I made myself a pot of decaffeinated coffee, put some biscuits on a plate, then pulled a late shift in the kitchen. I fancy myself as a fledgling Miss Marple, determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Poor Licorice. She looked a bit neglected, curled up in a basket, so gave her a biscuit and a stroke, and then she fell into a most contented-looking doze. In fact, I noticed her little pads twitching a few times. Perhaps in her sweet, deep dreams she was chasing rabbits, or maybe finding bits of people. Oh, those lovely pads. I leant down to smell one of them. Toasted cheese. Do you know what I mean? It had been noted just how sharp my sense of smell was at quite an early age. Then it suddenly dawned on me that so far I had failed to use my strongest sense on these finds. And there's me going by the nickname Bunty the Bloodhound at school. So I decided to perform a full sniff test of the appendages to see if that provided me with any additional information. Well, I'm slightly ashamed to say that all I derived from this process was a noseful of lochwater aroma, that distinctive and inescapable salt and weed smell that is essentially the smell of the air around here. It's a smell that I'm beyond used to now. It's what I breathe. And then a thought occurred to me. The half-hade still had its nose intact, and up until that moment I had not investigated its nasal cavities. So I put that right. Placing my hands either side of the dome of the skull, I tilted it in order to see up the nostrils. I should say that I had absolutely no idea what I expected to see up there. Actually, scratch that. I expected to see precisely nothing up there. But I did, in fact, see something. And bang, as if my coffee had been caffeinated, I felt an adrenaline shot of exhilaration fire through me. Oh, I had to fish this something out. What a clue it might be. Thinks, yes, tweezers in my first aid box. Until now, these had only been pressed into service for the removal of the occasional splinter. Not once for eyebrow hair removal. I'm not vain enough. Anyway, I thought now they will finally come into their own. The something was lodged quite some way up the left nostril, so it took several attempts before I managed to pinch the tip of it with the nipping ends of the tweezers. A little pull pressure brought it forward to the point where I could dispense with the tweezers and use the ends of my fingernails to pull it all the way out. I could see straight away that it was a piece of thin card that had been curled into a narrow tube. In this curled state, it was about 1.25 inches long. I put it on my placemat on the kitchen table and gently and carefully unfurled it. The piece of card, despite having been lodged deep into the cavity, had still sustained some water damage, but in its uncurled state, I could still see quite clearly what it was. A train ticket. The printed text had partially disappeared, so I had to root around in my bits and pieces drawer for my trusty magnifying glass. I can't imagine why I hadn't thought to get this out before. My forgetfulness, I suppose. I made a mental note to run the lens of it over the various finds at a later point. For now, I smoothed the ticket out as flat as I could get it, then leant in with my magnifier to try and see what I could see. It appeared to be the return portion of a ticket between Inverleith and somewhere beginning with M. My guess is it had said Manchester, although I don't think I could stand up in a court of law and swear to that. Inverleith, if you aren't already aware, is my nearest train station, although at a distance of 23 miles away from where I live. I wouldn't call it that local. It's one of those request stops. Most travellers would be forgiven for never noticing it. There's no ticket office there, so there's no doubt that the ticket I pulled out of the nostril was the return portion. Back to Manchester. Never used. I still have a number of acid-free preservation pockets from my library days, so I carefully took the ticket into one of these and wrote, "Found up the nose of the second head," on the label. There's something at the back of my mind. Jigsaw pieces fitting together. I can feel it. It will have to wait, though. The feeling is losing out to the effects of my pills. Nearly midnight. Go to sleep. Everything is all right. What became tonight? I felt a bit down when I woke up this morning. I think I just got out of the bed on the wrong side. I could tell straight away that Licorice picked up on this while we were having our breakfast. I'm sure she has a sixth sense. She has a way of looking at me, looking into me. So I knew what to do. To help clear my mind of the dark thoughts, I undertook some light duties in the boathouse. The tools needed cleaning and the floor needed swilling and mopping. It took me a while, but I enjoyed it. Plus, it's good to be thorough and systematic. It's in my nature. I like there to be an order to things. It helps me to get through the days. I was feeling much better by lunchtime, and so made myself a plate full of oven chips, which I partly did because the freezer's getting a bit cramped, what with all these body parts taking up space. I suppose I was mentally making room in anticipation of finding yet more bits and pieces, and yet, as I munched happily on the chips with a nice thick blob of tomato ketchup, I sort of knew somehow that I probably wouldn't be coming across any more bits any time soon. I mean, how many more parts of these poor souls' bodies would the perpetrator need to chop up and throw into the water? And you know something? As crazy as it sounds, it wasn't until then that I had my first thought about precisely who might have done this to these women. Except you have to remember that there's nobody else here, nobody. The loch is huge and remote, precisely why I came here. I think there are other dwellings elsewhere on its banks, but none of them are near enough to be visible to the naked eye, assuming they're even occupied. I've never met nor seen any of the people who live there. I haven't even heard the sound of a car engine since. I seem to think it was a taxi. If I close my eyes tight shut, I can see the word on the side of the vehicle when the people got out of it. The two people. I can't see their faces, no matter how hard I try. They're female, though. I wonder who they are. Oh, what am I talking about? It wasn't a taxi, it was a Tesco. They deliver my food once in a while, don't they? That's how I have my oven chips, silly, and all the other things. Also, there's the man who brings me my medication 4 times a year. Honestly, it's all go here when I think about it. Like Piccadilly Circus it is. Except it isn't really. Weeks and weeks pass. Nobody. I can't stand it. Honestly, my head sometimes. I'm fine, really. Absolutely fine. I just get very confused once in a while. Time passes strangely here. I mostly like it, but once in a while it bothers me. Then I pull myself together. I don't know what I'd do without Licorice. She keeps me focused. Beautiful girl. She doesn't like me sharing too much about her. Oh, she'll take all the direct praise and adoration I can throw at her. You might even want to call it worship. Except I'm not supposed to tell anyone else about her. So pretend I haven't. Please. I'm going to drift off now, thinking about the perpetrator in this entertaining murder mystery. I'm Hercule Poirot, and I'm going to point the finger. Oh, that's all for now. Go to sleep. Everything. Everything is all right. What became tomorrow? I felt a lot better when I got up today. Sometimes I like having a funny head. There are days when you want to forget things. I'm very good at forgetting. But it's also nice to remember things. Once in a while. There's a full moon, and so I'm allowed to have memories of them tonight. Annabelle was 31, with a suspect womb and a Persian cat. She had a lot of piercings and was covered with botanical tattoos, all those vine leaves going up her arms. I think she got the pig done when she was a teenager. Regretted it. Always wore those expensive tops and overgrown school sandals. Sort of hip, infantilized frump, if you ask me. I can't keep up with trends. I met her partner once at a work do. Monosyllabic. DJ. She met at Ayia Napa, wherever that is. Mo was Annabelle's partner in crime. Mancunian, old enough to be her mother. As brassy as a vicarage letterbox. They competed with one another, but Annabelle had the class. Despite this, their friendship was curiously mutual. And it was cemented by their shared scorn for me. Even if they were coming at that scorn from different directions, they met over me, and they bonded. Personally, I never thought they were particularly cut out for library work. They both lacked precision. I pride myself in my ability to expedite tasks to the letter of the specification. They were slapdash. I couldn't stand it. Mo was the instigator. Months and months of teasing, undermining, bullying, frankly. Annabelle joined in. Sometimes she was worse. I can see that little bitch's face now. I hadn't known hate till I met those two. I had to get away from them, and I thought I had. But then they found me. Only now I had Licorice on my side. She gave me strength and a purpose. These old enemies of mine would finally be put to good use. As offerings. As unpleasant as it was to meet them again, somehow I feel that I willed them to me. Mo was the first to go. Or should I say, Maureen, which, if you don't count her loud pleading and screaming before I topped and tailed her, reminds me of her last words to me, which included her calling me Margaret. Nobody calls me that. Nobody! Annabelle couldn't manage words, just lots and lots of crying. So her hate came off before her feet. To shut her up. So, there we are. Now we know the who in who might have done this. As to the why, the reason feels as ancient as the loch. And just as deep. I'm not afforded time enough to delve. There's only this time, just before sleeping, when some light gets in, before the light goes out. I can't say I was bidden. Throughout, my hands were guided. Obedience is underrated. I owe so much to Licorice. She is my life, and I have given that life to her, willingly. Through my acts of service, I have been allowed to remain here. I think about her all the time. I look at her whenever I can. Her lovely thick black coat, her wet nose, her waggy tail, her horns, her hooves, her incredibly sharp teeth, her huge, redder than red eyes. Beautiful girl. I'd do anything for her. That's all for now. Go to sleep. Everything is all right. Special Collections by Jez Conolly. You can find out more about this author and links to his work in our featured authors section on our website, nocturnaltransmissions.com.au. Now, wee lassies and laddies, let's see what's been happening in the realm of our Patreon subscribers. Those wonderful listeners who support our show and receive lots and lots of exclusive episodes just for them, by way of thanks for their largesse. Our latest inductees are new acolyte, Death Becomes Her. Welcome, Death Becomes Her. And new cohort, Fangora Brown. Welcome, Fangora. If you would like to join these two wise and wonderful individuals in their support of the show, just visit patreon.com/Nocturnal Transmissions and sign up as a minion, acolyte, or cohort. Oh, all right. I suppose it's time to go. We'll rejoin you in a fortnight's time with a fun little something just for our aforementioned minions, acolytes, and cohorts. Now, I'm not saying that we save the best stories for our Patreon subscribers. Oh no, far from it. Heavens, we're not nearly that organized. But I would say that we enjoy tucking very special selections away there for what we know is a discerning horror audience. As a matter of fact, you'll find that many of our favorite dark tales are only available within the cozy confines of Patreon subscribership. In recent times, we've shared some absolute crackers from the likes of H.G. Wells, M.R. James, Clark Ashton Smith, Edith Nesbit, H.P. Lovecraft. Oh, the list goes on. Anyway, if you want it, you know where to get it. This transmission was transmitted by Nocturnal Transmissions. Thanks in no small part to the generous assistance of our, you guessed it, Patreon subscribers. A special thank you goes out to our esteemed cohorts. Sam Hankins, Crunchy Kirby, Rachel Brown, JB, Andy Shammy, Tim Howard, Rebecca Gates, Drenny, Amanda Moore, Alex Brewis, Mudkip, Boole Swivney, Tippy Polo, Eugene Petrie, Heathen Soul, Adam, Jerry Taylor, Wayne Prince, Daniel Clanton, Jimmy Mack, Daniel Kamiankowski, Robert Troy, Hampton Peterson, Johnny Kelly, Kel Wielden, Evan Dooley, Arnie Frank, and Fangora Brown. You have been listening to Nocturnal Transmissions. All non-public domain stories are featured with the permission of the authors. All voices and production are concocted by Kristin Holland. Until next time, as always, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone. Especially yourself. Good night, gentle listener.